Hey guys, Terra Watcher here. In this video, I'm going to explain to you the flowchart you see on the screen. The flowchart describes how Nexus is going to create a liquid pledging derivative token for xPRISM. If you are participating in the Prism Farm event, this information will be relevant to you. So I'm going to start off the video by giving you a brief overview of what's going on, and if you want to learn more, just keep watching and I'll give you the full technical explanation. So basically, Nexus is a protocol on Terra, and they're going to be creating a liquid pledging derivative of xPRISM, and it's going to be called nexPRISM. As you know, when you pledge your xPRISM, you generate amps. But if you ever want to sell your xPRISM and you unpledge it, then all of your amps get destroyed. nexPRISM solves this problem. With nexPRISM, you'll constantly be earning amps in the background, but you can also buy and sell this token, and you can transfer it. So great, liquid pledging. Also, this token, nexPRISM, is going to enable the creation of a yLUNA vault on Nexus. Users will be able to stake yLUNA on Nexus to earn base and boosted yield from Prism Farm without having to amp. So users will just need yLUNA. They won't need to bother with pledging xPRISM. They just give their yLUNA to Nexus and then they earn base and boosted yield from Prism Farm. So at this point, if you're participating in the Prism Farm event, you should have these questions, right? You should be asking yourself, well, I've got some pledged xPRISM. Should I unpledge it and mint nexPRISM? If you do so, you'll lose all of your accumulated amps, but Nexus is going to make it worth your while because they're going to have some incentives for you to mint nexPRISM at the beginning, and I'll talk about that later. Also, you should be asking yourself, well, should I take my yLUNA from Prism and stake it on Nexus instead? If you don't have many amps, maybe you should, and I'll talk more about that later. Now, this third question will be relevant to everybody. Do I want to mint nexPRISM with my Prism earned from Prism Farm instead of pledging it myself? You may want to do that. All of us, I would assume, if you're still watching this video, then I think all of us at this point are participating in Prism Farm. We are getting Prism token rewards every day. So instead of pledging those ourselves, do we want to instead give them to Nexus? And of course, nexPRISM is going to earn a yield. So anyway, you might want to do some of these things. Now, if you're interested, I will give you the full technical explanation of what's going on. So this is all going to start with a lock drop. There's going to be an xPRISM lock drop where you give your xPRISM to Nexus and you agree to lock it for 1, 3, 6, or 10 months. The longer you lock it, the more Psi token you get. Psi token is the governance token for Nexus. So lockers are going to get a pro rata share of 25 million Psi, which is currently worth about 900,000 UST at current market prices. So basically, if you provide 1% of the xPRISM that goes into this lock drop, you're going to get 1% of the rewards, which would be 9,000 UST. However, that's not accounting for the amplification effect that will happen if you lock for longer. So yeah, I think we understand lock drops. And one thing going on here is Psi token rewards are going to be vested linearly over 3 months, regardless of your lock duration. All right, so it's all going to start with this lock drop. And what's going to happen to your xPRISM? Well, Nexus is going to take all the xPRISM it gets in the lock drop. Half of it is going to be used to mint nexPRISM, the liquid pledging derivative of xPRISM, and half of it is going to be left as xPRISM. And then the two are going to be paired to create a liquidity pool on Astroport. So the point is to provide deep liquidity for this pool. And this pool is going to need deep liquidity so that nexPRISM can be effectively pegged to xPRISM, because nobody's going to want to hold this liquid staking derivative if its price falls too low below the value of the underlying token, which is xPRISM, right? The peg has to hold, or else liquid staking is pointless. Like the peg between yLUNA and Luna has to be around 1. It has to be around parity, right? So we're going to need a deep liquidity pool here on Astroport, and that's the whole purpose of the lock drop. It's to bootstrap the nexPRISM, xPRISM liquidity pool. So that's what's going to be happening. So when your lock duration ends, you will be getting back LP tokens, which represent nexPRISM and xPRISM. So that's what's going to happen to your xPRISM if you contribute to the lock drop. And then there's going to be the yLUNA vault, right? So there will be a vault on Nexus where users can stake their yLUNA. This yLUNA will use the nexPRISM amps to earn base plus boosted yield from Prism Farm. So as you know, the yield from Prism Farm comes from two buckets. There's the base pool, and then there's the boosted pool. Users earn from the base pool depending on their yLUNA, and they earn from the boosted pool depending on their amps. Currently, the base pool is 80% and the boosted pool is 20%. You only have access to the boosted pool if you have amps. But if you don't have any amps, you can give your yLUNA to Nexus, and they will give you access to the boosted pool using their amps. So the yield distribution, this is important. So yLUNA staked on Nexus is going to be earning yield in Prism tokens from Prism Farm. That yield is going to go to three places. 5% is going to go to Psi stakers, right? Psi is the governance token for Nexus, and that makes sense. Nexus is providing you with this service, so they get a cut, which is only fair. So that 5% is going to go to Psi token stakers in the form of nexPRISM bought from the market. So there's going to be constant buy pressure on nexPRISM, and that's going to help maintain the peg. So the remaining 95%, that's going to be split between yLUNA stakers and nexPRISM stakers, right? And that only makes sense because the yield here is coming from the combination of yLUNA and the amps from xPRISM, right? So it makes sense that yLUNA stakers and nexPRISM stakers will share the yield. So that yield, the ratio is going to be adjusted to optimize the ratio of amps to yLUNA that Nexus has. And the Prism community discussed this little issue about a month ago. We were talking all about the ratio of amps to yLUNA in Prism Farm. Jimmy made a great calculator. I wrote some threads, and we determined that it's really, really hard to optimize the ratio to optimize for the highest amount of rewards from the farm. But Nexus is going to try and do that because that's the whole point of Nexus. It is a yield optimizer after all. So they're going to optimize the amps to yLUNA ratio by giving a higher percentage of the yield to yLUNA if they need more yLUNA, and giving a higher percentage of the yield to nexPRISM if they need more nexPRISM to make more amps. They're going to try and optimize it, and they're going to adjust the yield ratio between yLUNA and nexPRISM every 8 hours, okay? And keep in mind, nexPRISM earns no yield when not staked. So you have to take your nexPRISM and stake it with Nexus. If it's in the liquidity pool, it's not going to earn a yield. Now, nexPRISM is a liquid pledging derivative of xPRISM, right? And xPRISM earns the xPRISM yield, but nexPRISM is not going to get the yield from the yLUNA vault if it's not staked. Okay, that was pretty confusing. Hopefully you're still watching. Hopefully you understood that. Now, if you did understand that, I'm going to try and explain to you the implications and give you my predictions. So I just laid out the situation with nexPRISM, this new liquid pledging derivative. So here's my prediction. I think that very little xPRISM is going to go into the lock drop, so that which does is going to earn a lot of Psi token rewards. I think that because this is so incredibly convoluted. I can barely understand what I'm talking about, and I think there are probably about 5 people watching this video at this point. Nobody is going to be able to understand this. Very little xPRISM is going to go into the lock drop, okay? Also, I think there's lots of xPRISM pledged right now. There's a very high cost to unpledging because you burn all of your amps. The question is, are these Psi token rewards worth burning amps? I don't know. I just think very little is going to go into this lock drop, primarily because I don't think anybody will be able to understand it. Okay, another thing, contributing xPRISM to mint nexPRISM will be unattractive at first, but will get more attractive later. And there's two reasons for this. This is very important. One, Prism is going to be shifted from the base pool to the boosted pool over time, meaning that the nexPRISM yield is going to go up over time. So we know with Prism Farm, like I said before, there's the base pool, the boosted pool. The base pool is currently set at 80%, the boosted pool at 20%, but that ratio is going to shift. More Prism is going to go from the base pool to the boosted pool, meaning that people who are amping are going to get a higher yield, and people who are not amping are going to start getting a lower yield. That means yLUNA with no amps attached is going to be moving over to Nexus, because Nexus is going to provide those amps. And if there's more yLUNA on Nexus, then the yield for nexPRISM is going to go up. So I think the yield is going to be low to start. Also, at the beginning, nexPRISM is going to have very few amps behind it, right? But as the amps are generated, the yield that yLUNA is able to get in the Nexus Vault is going to go up. So the yield on nexPRISM is going to be going up. Now, if that wasn't confusing enough, this second thing, 2B, is going to be even more confusing. Like, try and wrap your head around this, okay? I dare you. Try and understand what I'm about to say. So, just imagine this scenario. User A mints one nexPRISM on Nexus by contributing one xPRISM today. In 3 months, user B comes along and mints one nexPRISM by contributing one xPRISM. So in 3 months. So we have nexPRISM minted now and nexPRISM minted in 3 months. Both of those nexPRISM tokens are going to get the same yield, even though the first one has generated more amps than the second one. The second one only started generating amps. He hasn't contributed many amps to the overall pile of amps, but still he's going to get a very high yield because his yield is benefiting from all the amps that have already been created. Just look at it this way. Imagine 10 months go by. There's this huge pile of amps from all of the xPRISM underlying nexPRISM that's been generating amps for a long time, and then one user comes along and contributes one xPRISM to get one nexPRISM. That nexPRISM token is going to get a proportional share of the yield, of the nexPRISM yield, proportional to his amount of nexPRISM, not proportional to the amps that he's contributed. So as time goes by, it's just going to be more attractive to give xPRISM to Nexus to mint nexPRISM. Hopefully you understood that. I think if I explain it anymore, it'll just get more complicated. But really, just in a nutshell, as time goes by, it's going to be more attractive to contribute xPRISM to Nexus to mint nexPRISM. More implications. All right, I don't really want to... Okay. It's uncertain what's going to happen when the farm event ends in 10 months, right? I don't want to rain on anybody's parade. That's what I was trying to say. I don't want to be a downer. I don't want to be too negative. But ultimately, what's going to happen when the farm event ends? Because all of this stuff, all of these amps, everything here is just premised on Prism token rewards from Prism Farm, right? That's going to all end in 10 months. And obviously, Prism team is going to come up with some kind of utility for amps. So amps will still be worth it. But things are really going to change in 10 months. So all of this, like, you don't know what's going to happen in 10 months. There's a lot of uncertainty, and you don't even know what's going to happen when the team and contributor cliff hits on August 1st. So the team and contributors, they're getting 30% of the total Prism token supply. That's going to be vested linearly over 3 years, but the cliff comes in 6 months. 6 months from the beginning of Prism. So that's going to be on August 1st. So there's going to be a huge amount of Prism introduced into the circulating supply on August 1st. That's probably going to be staked and pledged, and it's going to start generating amps, and that's going to reduce that's going to dilute everybody else's amps, basically. I don't really know what's going to happen. And then there's smart contract risk. There's always smart contract risk, but when you start integrating protocols and you layer protocols on top, you just get more smart contract risk, right? Nexus looks safe to me, but honestly, I've never used it. What do I know? They have a bug bounty. It looks okay, but you've always got to be aware. The more complexity that you add in DeFi, the more protocols that you stack on top of each other and integrate, the more smart contract risk you're going to build up. Okay, so I'm coming to the end of the video. Here are a few scenarios. Here's just a little advice about what you might want to do. If you have a lot of yLUNA staked in Prism Farm but no amps, you may want to take that yLUNA and put it on Nexus. Conversely, if you have lots of amps from all your pledged xPRISM, but you don't have much yLUNA, you may want to unpledge, take the hit from losing all your amps, and put it on Nexus, because your amps aren't really doing anything anyway if you don't have much yLUNA. Also, and this is what I'm going to do, like, number 3 is what I'm really interested in. I might just start taking my Prism rewards, and instead of pledging them myself, I may give them to Nexus, because of course I'll be foregoing generating my own amps, which means my overall Prism yield from Prism Farm is going to go down, but I'll be getting nexPRISM, and that's going to have its own yield. So that might be worth doing. I'm not sure, but I'm probably going to do that. Okay, so lastly, I just want to end with kind of a little joke, something a little lighthearted. Like, I just want to recap what has been happening here, because this just gets so deep and so crazy that I think people kind of lose perspective of how deep and how crazy it actually is. So we started with Prism, right? We bought that with the Forge. Then they said we could stake it. Okay. Then we said we could, they said we could pledge the staked Prism. Great, earn amps. And now they're saying, well, we were going to have a liquid pledging derivative token. And that's going to be nexPRISM. What's going to happen next? Like, this is crazy. Just look at this evolution on the screen. Man, Prism is a total trip. Man. And that's the end. That's the end of the video. Honestly, I think there's about 2 people watching this video at this point. If you are one of those 2 people, I commend you. Maybe you can figure out what's going on here, and maybe you can use that knowledge to your advantage. I think I'll end on that note. Okay. Goodbye, everybody.